Being diagnosed with a chronic condition or autoimmune disease can be very daunting and oftentimes is extremely isolating. But today's guest shows us how not only you can overcome any ailment that may be plaguing you, but that you can do it on your own terms. Meet Beth Schultz, a nutritional therapy practitioner and Wahls Protocol Health Practitioner who works with Dr. Terry Wahls as her Radical Health Upgrade Coach and Wahls Protocol Certification Coordinator, helping people like you overcome your chronic health conditions through diet, lifestyle, and everything in between. Having been diagnosed with MS and Lyme disease, Beth not only has a passion for this type of work, but she lives it every single day. Beth is on a mission to let others know that hope and healing happens. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Road to Recovery podcast. And today, like I mentioned before in the intro, we have a very special guest, someone that I've actually spent quite a lot of time with over the last year. Her name is Beth Schultz, and she works with another person that's very special and dear in my heart, Dr. Terry Wahls. What's crazy is your own journey, having dealt with Lyme and multiple sclerosis yourself and overcoming those immense obstacles to now be giving back and kind of giving other people hope that they can enter their own healing journey. And that's something that you've done for me over the past year. So I'm very excited to have you on. So honestly, where can we begin? Because there's so much that we could potentially talk about. So let's kind of go back to your beginning, your initial symptoms, and then leading to diagnosis, and kind of how you found Dr. Terry Wahls and this new path that you're on, helping other people achieve their health goals.
That's a long question.
Yeah, it's loaded.
I was diagnosed with MS 17 years ago. That was, I was on vacation with my family and I got a headache and I lost partial eyesight in one eye. It seemed like it was a migraine when you get like the aura migraine. Mm-hmm. My sister had a lot of migraines, so she actually gave me one of her migraine medicines. I took it, the headache went away right away, but the eyesight never cleared up. I just figured, it was just lingering. After a week of the eyesight, and I believe it was my left eye, didn't return, I decided to go to urgent care. They gave me a migraine shot, left me in a dark room for 30 minutes, came back, turned on the light and said, "Is your eyesight back?" And it was not back. And they said, "Well, that's really strange. We're going to send you up to ophthalmology." It was a clinic that kind of had everything in it. Mm-hmm. And ophthalmology looked in my eye and she said, "Well, this is optic neuritis and you probably have multiple sclerosis." And I think, I'm like 27 years old, a single mom. I really didn't know what MS was. The only vision I thought of MS was a wheelchair, or what I thought of it. And so I thought she was kind of nuts because I wasn't in a wheelchair. I just couldn't see very well. So they dilated my eyes. They sent me home, didn't give me sunglasses, anything. So I get in my car and I start to drive and I can't see anything. I lose it. I start crying. I was needed to pick up my 6-year-old daughter at preschool or kindergarten. So I pulled over and I called a friend and asked them to please pick her up. That was a really hard day.
I can imagine. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy. It kind of reminds me of kind of when my symptom, and I, for preface, anyone watching that hasn't known my story, I do not have MS or any of that stuff. But when I started experiencing tingling in my right hand, I was kind of like, oh, okay, carpal tunnel type stuff. And eventually, within a month, I just woke up one morning and my whole spine was burning. And I went to urgent care, kind of like yourself with your eyesight. And I went in, they did an x-ray of my full spine. Everything was pretty normal, nothing abnormal. And they just assumed I pinched a few nerves. But by that time, I would have pinched like probably 4 or 5 nerves in different parts of my body because I was having problems with my arms and now my back. So at least you were sent somewhere where they did some more diagnostics. I was sent home with naproxen. So it's kind of but it is like I at that moment I too was like looking up MS because I was like, oh, maybe it's this. And at that time, my vision of MS was very much like yours. It was just like complete debilitation. You're just in a chair. There's no hope. And then I found actually Montel Williams was the first person I found that really inspired me, would just for anyone dealing with chronic illness, because he's dealt with MS for a long time as well and has been a real advocate for it. So he was the one that really first gave me hope. And then I kind of stumbled upon Terry Wahls and stuff like that. But let's kind of pick up at your story where you're still figuring all this out. You've just been diagnosed. You're driving home. You're thinking, oh boy.
Right. So back then, medical care was a lot easier to get into. So I actually I was scheduled for an MRI the next day.
Oh, wow.
I got to see a neurologist the day after that. I went to the neurologist's office. The MRI results were there were no brain lesions. They didn't do my spine. There was a lesion in my eye nerve, which is optic neuritis. He did some blood work and said, this easily could be an isolated incident. You may never have another symptom again. Let's think that you're going to be fine. You do not have multiple sclerosis at this time because you need multiple lesions. Mm. And he said it'll probably go away in 2 months, and we'll just hope that you'll be fine after that. He was right. It went away in 2 months. I was relieved. I said, you know what? Isolated incident will never happen again. I think 3 days later, I woke up and I had lost eyesight in the other eye. Oh, and wow. I wouldn't lose complete eyesight. It would be foggy. There would almost be like these black and white squiggly worms just going through my eyes. I couldn't see a full picture out of that one eye. I went back. We did a second MRI. This time we did my spine and my brain. I had another lesion on the other eye, and I had a lesion on my brain. So that is multiple sclerosis. He did inform me that he had ran a Lyme disease test at that time, and it was positive. He didn't believe it, so he sent that sample of blood back in for a second test. It was positive again. He still didn't believe it, so he asked me to go get blood work again. They say that Lyme disease doesn't exist in the state of Oregon, where I live. We got the third test, and it was positive again. He said he didn't believe it, so we left it at that. I got a call from the health department a couple weeks later who said, where do you think you got Lyme disease? Had you been camping? Did you travel out of state? And I said, well, wait, I don't have Lyme disease. I have a neurologist. He says there's no Lyme disease in Oregon. And they said, you don't have 3 positive Lyme disease tests and don't have Lyme disease. Maybe he doesn't know how to treat it. So we'll give him a call and let him know what antibiotic you should be on and for how to please come in. And he gave me 28 days of doxycycline and told me we would never discuss Lyme disease in his office again.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
It did. It just felt strange.
Lyme disease is one of those things, from what I understand, especially chronic Lyme, people that have chronic Lyme. It's one of those things where a lot of people don't believe chronic Lyme is even a thing. So, I've never even brought that up. I was tested for Lyme disease, but the standard 2-blot IgGs or whatever they do, and mine came back negative. But there are so many cofactors or co-infections that go along with Lyme. It's actually crazy.
And the testing is not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
The testing does not always find Lyme disease. And a lot of doctors don't know that. There was a story on ABC News a few years ago that stated that the Lyme disease test was not accurate and you should continue to be tested if you really believe you have it. There are some labs that you can that specialize in Lyme disease, and they seem to find it better. Unfortunately, insurance rarely covers them. Mm-hmm. I believe actually Medicare is now covering IGeneX, which is huge.
Yeah, IGeneX is one of the, really, for anyone listening that is like paranoid about this stuff, IGeneX is one of the good labs. And then someone else gave me another one that was DNA something, but I couldn't remember the end of it. If I find it, I'll put it in the description.
DNA Connections.
Connections. That's what it is. DNA Connections are the two. But that's, I know, it's once you get into this community and like you've worked with so many patients now through Wahls and probably just meeting people, you meet so many people, you feel like then Lyme is like way more prevalent, or just any of these diseases are just way more prevalent than they make it out to be. And maybe it is, or maybe it's just the fact that we connect with these people because we have similar problems. But
well, and one thing I loved when I first read Dr. Terry Wahls' book was, she writes the standard of care for multiple sclerosis and then the functional medicine approach to multiple sclerosis. And Lyme disease was one of the things mentioned that not everybody with MS has Lyme disease, but it's something you need to investigate. And a functional medicine doctor is going to investigate that.
Something that I found was really interesting is I'm currently working with someone that also has worked with Terry Wahls, Dr. Ken Charlin, who you know very well. And something that we were talking about when I was in my appointment with him was we were talking about a lot of people with MS show Epstein-Barr virus as well as like a commonality with people that come in to see him. He sees that a lot in MS patients, which I found really interesting.
So I've had a lot of virus tests done, a lot of other things, and Epstein-Barr is one of the things that I have. Another one is chlamydia pneumonia, and that is a lung infection. And a doctor at Vanderbilt University found it in his wife with multiple sclerosis. And so he has a 3-year combo antibiotic protocol that he uses for people with MS and chlamydia pneumonia. Unfortunately, I did do that later on in my journey. I did the entire 3-year antibiotic protocol, and it still didn't help. So that's
So, I mean, Tommy here is joining the party a little late, but so far, Beth has been telling me. So Beth is a Wahls health practitioner as well as a health coach and nutrition certified as well. And she's been basically telling us her story about being diagnosed with MS for the first time after having some optic neuritis in her eye. I said that like a southerner, neuritis. Optic neuritis in her eye, and then just assumed it was a one-time incident. It went away after 2 months, and then 2 months later, it was gone. And then it came into her other eye, got a new MRI, had some lesions in her brain as well, and ta-da, MS. And then it was later discovered that she actually was carrying Lyme disease as well after doing 3 consecutive tests for that. So that's kind of where we're at with her story. So I was really curious. So now we're at this point where you've found your diagnosis pretty much. But we know, especially after talking about all this Terry Wahls stuff, that a diagnosis really doesn't tell you necessarily what's driving the mechanism of all those things. Like you probably have a really good inkling with your Lyme disease being a big trigger for these other problems. But when was it that you kind of found your way into seeking out functional medicine? And when did you find Terry Wahls and reading her book in your journey?
It was 9 years.
Yeah.
9 years of, I believed my neurologists. They were the best of the best, and they didn't believe there was any cause to MS. There was really anything you could do but try the disease modifying drugs. I think I was told that nutrition was helpful for general health, and it was good to follow a good diet. It was a low fat diet that they recommended, but that it wasn't going to actually do anything for, it wasn't really going to help me. I tried the low fat diet. It didn't help me. It was no fun. So I didn't stick to it. I did try 2 different disease modifying drugs. The first one was Avonex, which is an interferon, which is a mild chemotherapy. It was a once a week shot. And I am terrified of needles. Like it took me almost a year of having my keto mojo to actually prick my finger and check my ketones, because that's how big of a baby I am. And that's just a finger prick. So when I got that needle, it's an intramuscular needle too. So it's about that big.
Yep.
I would actually drink a bottle of wine and take Xanax once a week and give myself that injection. It would give me the flu for 3 days. So I could barely get out of bed for 3 days. One of the side effects is suicidal depression.
Oh, wow.
So thank goodness I was a single mom. I had a fabulous nurse practitioner. And she was great. She listened to me. She cared. And she wanted to know what the drug was. And she read about it. And she said, suicidal depression, that really scares me because you're a single mom with no family in this state. Who watches you? Nobody is going to watch you if this happens. So if you're going to do this, you are coming to my office once a month. You're right down the street. You can come in at lunch. We can talk. You don't have to pay me. We just have to check in once a month. What an incredible, like, who does that?
No one I've met.
No,
Right?
definitely
Tommy.
not.
Right. Patty was a lifesaver to me. So I think it was probably about 9 months in. I come in one day and she's like, "Who are you? I don't recognize you. You are like, you're just, are you happy at all? Do you like life at all? You're miserable. Your symptoms haven't stopped. Your symptoms are worse than they were when you started. And it makes you sick for 3 days out of every single week. Why do you do it?" And I was like, well, I don't have to do it because it didn't help me. It does help some people. It didn't help me. So I stopped doing that. And I really, I don't know what changed my mind about Lyme disease. I think actually it was when the MS Center in Portland sent me to what they called the very best infectious disease doctor in the state of Oregon. We had to drive 3 hours to go see him. Me and my boyfriend go get a hotel. We have to find somebody to watch my daughter while we're out of town. It's not it's a lot to take that trip. We wake up in the morning to go to the appointment and he calls and he cancels it. And I was like, "What do you mean he canceled it?" And he said, "Well, he looked at your file and you don't have Lyme disease." And I was like, what does he mean? At this time, I had 5 CDC positive Lyme disease tests because I had more. And I was like, all he's looking at is symptoms and 5 positive Lyme disease tests, not 1 negative one. How does he know I don't have Lyme disease? Somehow I convinced them to let me get a phone conversation with him. It took a couple weeks. He called me one day and it just offended me so much. He told me that I had LymeDisease.com. And if I would get off the internet and stop reading about it, it would go away. And that just infuriated me. And I decided that we had to do something about it. So I asked around. We had the Oregon Lyme Disease Network in Oregon, a woman whose daughter almost died from Lyme disease. It got into her heart. It was horrible. None of the doctors in Oregon would help her. They had to travel out of state to find people to help her. She is now, it took years and years and years, but she is now a married woman with children and happy and healthy. They recommended a neurologist in Connecticut that understood MS and Lyme disease. So I got on a plane, went to Connecticut. That's not cheap. You know that.
No.
He didn't take insurance, so it was all cash. I had to borrow money from my family to even do that. He looked at my charts and he was disgusted. He was like, I just can't even believe how you've been treated. You absolutely have Lyme disease and you have multiple sclerosis. This Lyme disease has turned into an autoimmune issue. You have both. You need to be treated for both. We're going to do 90 days of IV antibiotics, knock this out of the park, and then we'll deal with the MS. I got back home. It took probably 6 months, 9 months to get my insurance to do the IV antibiotics. We started them, unfortunately. So they gave me a PICC line into my heart.
Oh, yep.
You have to do like a little bit of something. You kind of flush it out and you do that injection really fast. And then the antibiotic part, you have to do really slow. Little pump, wait a few minutes, a little bit more, wait a few minutes. And maybe 2 weeks into it, I wasn't paying attention. And, because the first one you do fast. And so I just shot the whole thing in. And I got just hives all over my body, flushing it was horrible. Call the doctor, allergic reaction. And they couldn't think of any other IV antibiotic to give me. So the option was to continue it and take really strong allergy medicine or not get it at all. So we chose the allergy medicine, which makes you allergy medicine messes with your mind, really. And when you're using antibiotics to kill Lyme disease or anything to kill Lyme disease, you get what they call a Herxheimer reaction. So when you kill the bug, it releases its toxin when it kills, and it gives you the symptoms that you had from that are increased. So that 100 days, and it happened to be, I owned a business. We owned a restaurant delivery company. The office was in my house, which was great. I could just put on clean pajama pants every morning, go to work. My business partner happened to go out of town the week that I started my IV antibiotics. So I was in charge, and he was gone. And I don't even remember that 100 days. I ended up, they accidentally gave me an extra 10 days of IV antibiotics. They forgot to stop, which was a good thing because I think it really helped me. But I don't even remember that 100 days. And it just so happened one of the people I hired to help me out because I could barely work, stole all our money during that time. Oh. My business partner came back and he's looking at our books and he's like, did you ever like look at the sales to the money coming in? And I was like, nope. I don't really, I just made bank
deposits. You took an opportunity basically.
Huh?
You took an opportunity basically when you were at your worst, really.
Right. Yep. She stole a lot of money from us. And, luckily we made it through. And after that 100 days, I got to have an MRI and 13 brain and spine lesions were gone.
Wow.
Amazing.
That was incredible.
I had none. It was amazing. And my neurologist still, and I had a new neurologist at this time that didn't believe in Lyme disease either. She said it was a coincidence.
I'll take it. I'll take that coincidence any day.
I think that really reinforces about just getting different opinions for people because that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was amazing. And so I thought it was gone. I never wanted to admit that I had MS. I just wanted to have Lyme disease because it was treatable. It would go away. And that was what I wanted. And the lesions went away. So I was convinced it was gone and I was going to be fine and it was over. My boyfriend and I, he asked me to marry him. We got married. We decided to have a baby right away. And as soon as I got pregnant, I started to worry about the Lyme disease again because you can pass Lyme disease to a baby. And that can be, I knew how horrible it was to have Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. I decided to treat with antibiotics the entire pregnancy. I was lucky enough to one of the best pediatric Lyme disease doctors actually called me and asked me how he could help and gave me recommendations. My OB at the time thought that it was silly. She didn't think it was going to be harmful necessarily to take the antibiotics through pregnancy, but she just thought it was silly. The CDC didn't believe that you could pass it to a baby. But she wouldn't write the prescription, but I had somebody that would. So we did that. A week before she was born, the CDC changed their website to say that a mother can pass it to their baby and they should be treated with antibiotics. And what was wonderful is I remember she put her arm around me and she said, good job. And she said, always listen to yourself and always take your health. Your health is your responsibility. Mm-hmm. Don't let it, you did the right thing. So she actually agreed then to treat me with IV antibiotics during the labor and to test the baby when she was born. My daughter Ella was negative for Lyme disease. Awesome. And it all seemed good. I did decide to breastfeed while taking antibiotics because you can also pass it through breast milk. And the pediatric Lyme disease doctor that I talked to said, I believe you already carried her for 9 months. If there is a little Lyme disease, she probably already would have it. And your breast milk is going to be the best thing to keep her healthy and give her the best chance of doing it. She was a very colicky baby. She cried hours and hours every night. Luckily, my husband is a very patient man who could hold her while she screamed for hours and let me sleep. I went back to work when she was 2 months old. I sat down at the computer. I was feeling fine. By the time I left work, I couldn't feel the bottom half of my body. It was completely gone, just gone. I walked inside to nurse her and my husband handed her to me and I just started crying. And I said, I can't feed her. I don't want to give this to her. I can't do it. I was hysterical. He was like, you know what? I'll make a bottle. We have formula from the hospital, gave us formula. We'll give her a bottle. She had a bottle. She didn't cry that night.
Wow.
The colic was gone. So that poor baby, she was crying from the antibiotics in my milk. So we decided to, formula feed her, which was hard for me because I'm very pro breastfeeding, but sometimes it doesn't work out. So that was, my MS, my Lyme disease was back.
That's insane.
I saw my neurologist. I begged her to do IV antibiotics and she said, no way. I got back on an airplane and went to Connecticut. That was the hardest trip I have ever taken. I could not feel half of my body whatsoever, walking with a cane, My flights all got delayed. I think I was in airports for 24 hours. I barely made. I got to Connecticut 2 hours before my appointment. And it was funny because I actually, by that time, my adrenaline, like, that I was on like my 10th wind. Mm-hmm. And the neurologist was like, you seem great. You have tons of energy. You seem great. And I was like, no, I think I'm just, yeah. He actually didn't want to do IV antibiotics again. We did test for Lyme disease, and I was negative for Lyme disease at that time. That is when the chlamydia pneumonia test came back positive. So he said, you know what, we're going to do this 3-year combination oral antibiotics instead. So that was 3 years of antibiotics. Altogether, I did antibiotics for 8 years.
Wow.
Because I'm stubborn.
No, I'm with you. I relate to this story so hardcore, not as intense as yours for sure, but I've done the thing. I've gone to the neurologist, told me I didn't have this when I did, and all of this stuff. I was with my parents. He was like, basically, I was like, no, you don't have nerve damage. Like, we can't find it on the thing. Yeah. And I went on my own intuition and sought out to get a recommendation to see the top doctors at Mass General in Boston. Flew all the way there, spent a couple $1,000s to stay there, and then have a meeting, which was interrupted by a, believe it or not, an active shooter situation during my visit. There was an active shooter during my visit at the hospital. During my visit with the doctor, we get this notification. We thought it was a drill. Real situation. We had to get all of our patients into the hallways, get them into certain corridors that were quote safer. And that completely derailed the entire appointment because after that was done, it's how do you come back from that? And then my doctor never even specialized in anything nerve related. It was just migraines. She was a migraine expert. I didn't even meet the doctor I was supposed to see that I had spent, you had spent thousands of dollars to go and do stuff. And so it was really unfortunate. And that's when I started looking. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get anywhere doing this, generally speaking, with conventional medicine. At least I'm probably not going to get much further. I've exhausted my GP. He hates me. And so we're I totally relate to that feel. So at this point, you've been doing 8 years of antibiotics. And then
one day I woke up, I was vomiting 2 hours every morning. I would wake up and just vomit for 2 hours every morning. And I just, one day it was like, I can't do this anymore. It's not getting better. It's just constant symptoms coming and going. And the fatigue, if I took a shower in the morning before work, I had to go lay down for half an hour before I could get up again. I couldn't learn new things. So I could do my job. My job was easy. I knew how to do it, but you couldn't give me a new task at work. I couldn't learn how to do an Excel spreadsheet. Couldn't do it. I couldn't read a book and remember what it said when I put it down. It was a horrible way to live. Yeah. And so I really just kind of gave up and said, this is it. None of the MS medications don't work for me. The antibiotics are not going to work for me. This is just going to be my life. I'm going to be blind eventually because at this time I don't even know how many cases of optic neuritis I had. The damage to my eye nerves was terrible. I couldn't feel my legs still, so I'm going to end up in a wheelchair one day, and that's just how life is. And one day I had been estranged from my best friend for years, and she came back into my life, and she had chronic illness that nobody could diagnose. I knew it was Lyme disease. I knew that it was Lyme disease, but her Lyme disease test was negative. Her husband just kept searching and searching for answers, and he found this local woman who was an iridologist. Have you ever heard of iridology?
Never heard of that.
Never heard of it. No.
Okay, so they study the iris of your eye. They take a picture of your eye, very detailed, and they say that each line, every part of your eye represents a different part of your body. I don't explain it well enough. They explain it much better than me. It kind of sounds crazy, right? So my girlfriend goes in for her first appointment. I go with her. The woman works in her house. She takes a nice picture of both eyes. sends you back into the reception area with her husband, the receptionist, while she examines the eye. She brings us back in about a half an hour later, and she looks at my friend and she says, well, I give you my top 3 concerns, and we work on those for, top 3 concerns, and then we'll go deeper when it, that happens. And colon is, and my friend just starts to cry. And she's like, okay, what did I do? I just said colon. And she said, well, my mom died of colon cancer a couple years ago. And she said, okay. She's like, you really need to go and have a colonoscopy done. And she said, I actually had one last week. And she said, did they remove a large polyp? And she's like, yep, they did remove a large polyp. And she said, well, get back to me when the results come in, because it was precancerous, and that's okay. It's going to be, it's okay. We're going to work on that. The results came in. It was precancerous. Like, wow. How, and then she said, bacteria is the second concern, and parasites is the third one. Bacteria would be Lyme disease as a bacteria. She started treating her herbally and doing an herbal parasite cleanse. My friend would send me the things that would come out of her, the parasite cleanse. Wow. She had a lot of parasites. And when she started treating with the herbs, she went back and had another Lyme disease test, and her Lyme disease test was positive.
Wow, interesting.
So like, this woman got that all from looking in her eyes. She knew nothing about her family history. She knew nothing. It was amazing. So I finally got an appointment with her, and she really just said, it's all digestion. Your digestion is a mess. We're going to fix your digestion and you're going to be fine. And I was like, oh, really? Like, really? I've had MS for 9 years, and we're going to fix my digestion and I'll be fine. I had nothing else to do. There was,
you got nothing to lose. Yep.
I have nothing to lose. So, what did she, she put me on food enzymes with hydrochloric acid. She wanted me on a vegan diet. She never said anything about gluten. It was just a vegan diet. And really pure water was a big part of it. You have to drink the cleanest water, flush out your body. She really liked Himalayan salt, using Soleil water, which is basically salt water. Mm-hmm. And we did a 10-day master cleanse. Have you ever heard of the master cleanse?
I've heard of a master cleanse.
They had a little about it.
Lemon, fresh squeezed lemon, maple syrup, and cayenne.
Yeah.
And while we do this, so you're going to not eat for 10 days, I'm going to also give you colon hydrotherapy every day. So you're going to just get 40 gallons of water. Yeah.
That's fun.
And that was the day she told me, we're going to do this, and you have to get off all your prescription drugs. And so at that time, I had been on Vicodin, Xanax, and Klonopin, and a sleeping pill for 9 years. Every single day I took those drugs.
Those are some things you can't just stop.
Right. And I never thought of myself as an addict, because I never took more than I was supposed to take. I took but I took them every day. So me and my husband get in the car, and my husband's like, I'm excited about this. Like, and I'm going to do the cleanse with you. We're going to do it, and this is going to be great. And I was like, oh, honey, we're never going back there. That woman is crazy. We're not, like, I'm not doing that. And he looked at me and he's like, because you're a prescription drug addict, honey. You don't want to give up your drugs. And I thought, what a jerk. Like, who is he? And then I thought about it, and I was like, whoa, I don't want to give up my drugs. I really don't. I thought really long and hard about this. I did have a medical marijuana prescription in the state of Oregon. I talked to my medical marijuana grower. He said, you know what, I can give you some really high stuff that will take care of the pain. It'll help you sleep. Let's try it. Let's slowly wean off these things. Let's try the cannabis. I went back to the woman and I said, I would like to get off these prescription drugs. I think it would be good for me, but I do need to try. I can't do it. Like, can I try the cannabis? And she's like, not a fan of it. Don't really know it. I don't like anything that people are dependent on, but if it gets you off all of these prescriptions, let's do it. And you know what? I actually did it in like 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
In 3 weeks'
That's
time,
impressive.
I weaned off all of those drugs, and the cannabis worked. Well, it worked. I could handle the pain. I slept well. We did the 10-day cleanse, and that was, I don't recommend the master cleanse.
No.
But that was a huge reset. It really helped me. And, I was feeling so much better. I kind of noticed. So I was a vegetarian from the age of 16 to 21. I had been a vegan for about a year at 20. And I kind of get depressed. It's just my brain likes cholesterol. It likes the nutrients in meat. And so I was feeling better, but I kind of noticed that depression coming back. Me and my mom were scrolling through Facebook one day on vacation, and this TED Talk pops up. Doctor gets out a wheelchair using diet. And I was like, oh, let's press play on that. Dr. Wahls TED Talk. And she ate meat and vegetables. And I was like, oh, a steak sounds really good. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna do this. And I didn't know what the paleo diet was. So there was a woman in my town that had a paleo bar company. I messaged her on Facebook and said, hey, how do I do this? And she said, order the book Practical Paleo. Because at the time, Dr. Wahls' book wasn't out. She was talking about it. It was going to come out, but there was no book. I got that book as we were heading to an airport to go on vacation for a week. Practical Paleo by Diane Sanfilippo. Good book. And the first quarter of the book is all about why you would give up grains, dairy, and eat a paleo diet. And it was fantastic. I couldn't put the book down. We got off the airplane in Texas for a family vacation, and I was like, I am paleo. I am never eating grains or dairy again in my life. And my sister-in-law was like, you're crazy. Like, we're going to eat all week. And I was like, I'm not eating anything. Like, I'm eating steak and vegetables. That's all I'm going to have. And I did. And I have had grains since then, but I have never willingly eaten gluten since that day. And that was probably 8 years ago.
Wow. For me, that when I found Terry Wahls' book, it was probably like when you found the Practical Paleo book. As far as like when you were reading it, you were just like, things are clicking in my brain. And I'd never like considered any of that stuff before. So it was really interesting for me. So when did this kind of, so I'm assuming that after implementing these things, you began to feel even better over time.
Oh, fantastic. It was less than 6 months then on the paleo diet that I was hiking up mountains again. I had lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
I was a new person. And so I look back at my whole life. I never thought I was a depressed person. I just saw life the way that I saw life. Like the way that I saw life was how I thought it was. I believe that gluten always caused brain inflammation for me. And when I gave up that gluten, the sun came out. Oh, wow. It was amazing the way I felt. And I believe my daughter, if she eats gluten, you can tell in her emotions. We don't get stomach aches. Our stomach doesn't hurt. How our brain feels is what happens when we eat gluten.
Yeah, it's really interesting because so my friend told me that I think he lost a little internet connection there, but he was a vegan for a long time, and we both struggled from eating disorders, and that's kind of how we connected. But Tommy was a vegan for a few years. 4 years? Was that how many years you were vegan?
Roughly just over 4 years, yeah.
Yeah, but that's after a couple of years. He too started noticing that he wasn't feeling like as good on the vegan diet, and actually has since come off it and has had some better health outcomes with that as well. And I know Terry Wahls goes into her book a little bit, and not to like discredit veganism or anything. She does a really good job of navigating how we can apply these principles to whatever lifestyle you feel most comfortable with. And that's something that I really appreciate about her book. So after you found Terry Wahls, when did you guys like connect, and when did you start getting into the health coaching stuff and helping other people?
So the first time I got to talk to her when her book came out, she had a Facebook contest. I don't even remember what you had to do, share a post or something on Facebook to win a 30-minute Skype call with her. That was before Zoom. Yeah. And, I won.
Oh, wow.
So I got 30 minutes with Dr. Wahls. That was like, and I think it was at like 5 a.m. because she is in Iowa. I was in Oregon. So it was like 5 a.m. my time. I'd never used Skype. I've never been so nervous in my whole life because she truly is like my hero. I just adored this woman. And that was a great talk. And I was doing really good at that time. And I had decided that maybe I should do the autoimmune paleo diet and get rid of all nuts, nightshades, eggs. So I had not given up eggs yet because I hadn't read her book. So when I told her I was going to do that, she said, you know what, let's just give up eggs. And I was like, well, I could do that. I really don't think eggs are a problem. We have our own chickens in the backyard. They eat organic, soy, corn-free food. That's not going to be a problem. And she's like, well, let's just try it. Give it 6 months, or I think I only had to do 3 months of no eggs. So I gave up the eggs. Oh, the first day that I got to have eggs back was great. I made a paleo bread, and we actually made paleo French toast in the morning. I ate it. It was delicious. And 30 minutes later, I had optic neuritis. My eyesight was so fuzzy and weird. And I was like, what? Eggs? No way. And that really, I didn't want to give up eggs.
I think it's really interesting how food can kind of play into all these, a bunch of stuff. Like Tommy was messaging me the other day, and he has been dealing with some torn bicep, tricep injuries and some meniscus tears for a long while. And it's just been agony for the dude. And he recently kind of shifted his diet around, and it actually made it feel better. We don't really need to go into specifics, but like, I was amazed just to hear that, how powerful your
I would
your
love to
diet
know what
can
he
be.
did.
It was basically what I done. I was roughly about 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. So I reduced it down to around about between maximum of 100, usually about 50 grams. For some reason, since then, literally everything's disappeared. And I've had this problem for probably over about 2.5 years nearly.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is. Food is amazing. It really is.
My thinking is that maybe the carbohydrates are causing some sort of inflammation, and that is exacerbating the problem.
Yep.
Yeah. And continue. Go ahead, Beth.
When I decided that I had to go to the Nutritional Therapy Association, I think it was, so I own that restaurant delivery company. We delivered, this was before there was DoorDash, before everybody did this. We were like one of the original restaurant delivery companies. We had 17 restaurants, none of them really healthy. And I was able to never touch the stuff after we did paleo. But I remember one day there were customers who called, 5 days a week, some 7 days a week. I knew these people really well. I owned the company for 13 years. And this woman called and she ordered her 6-pack of Coke, cheese fondue, a pizza, and a pasta. That was going to be her lunch. And she then told me how I wasn't going to hear from her for probably 6 months because she was having her stomach stapled to lose weight. And my business partner sitting next to me, and I said, no, you're not. You're going to not order this food today. You're going to have a salad with water and meat. You're not going to have your stomach stapled. You just need to eat better. Look at your diet. It's horrible. And my partner hits me. He's like, you can't do that, Beth. I was like, somebody needs to. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this job anymore. I need to go back to school. The world doesn't have to be sick. We just need to eat good food. Like, you look at chronic illness. I think kids now have 54% of kids have a chronic illness. That's not normal.
Especially obesity. Obesity here in the UK is absolutely rife, especially in children as well.
And it's really bad. I mean, it's bad. I talk about this statistic a lot, but 88% of adults in the United States have some form of metabolic disease. And that's like, when I heard that number, I was like, 80, that's like way over that's a huge majority of people. It's crazy. And, and the saddest part about it is that for most people, it's not necessarily a difficult thing to change. It may take time. Well, no, it's a difficult thing to do it. I'm one of those anal people, so I'll just do things like to the T most of the time, depending on what it is. But
but it is hard because we're addicted to those foods.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We're
but
truly
in theory,
addicted.
in theory, the mechanism is simple. Like the mechanism is like change. Like the idea is like change your diet, improve. But the actual doing it, I witness it in my parents, who I've been trying to kind of help them out, like do some basic Wahls principle stuff just to help them out with weight or whatever, or just to have more energy, because my dad is zapped all the time. And I mean, they failed in 3 days. Like they're back to eating crescent rolls and a bunch of stuff. And I was like, so man, I know I haven't had them in like 2 years, but yeah, those things.
My wife's going through this at the moment, as you know yourself, Ryan. My wife's obviously, she's now been diagnosed as type 2 diabetic, but everything that you were saying kind of makes me think maybe the problem that she's suffering with at the moment may possibly be Lyme disease, because to give you kind of full context, she's actually had ovarian cancer in the past. She obviously had a full hysterectomy. She had the Hickman line in as well, that you talked about. But recently, she's, for maybe about the last 4 years, they're actually talking about putting her on like a long-term antibiotic, because they don't know what illness she's suffering with at the moment. But she's suffering concentration problems. She can't sleep. She's getting swelling in her joints. She's been very sick in the morning. Recently, she had E. coli in her bladder. They don't know why that she keeps getting these like kind of fungal infections in her bladder. And recently, it's just been one thing after another, but they don't know what the illness is that she's actually got. But they've been talking about putting her on like a long-term antibiotic eventually. So I wonder if it'd be worth her getting checked for something like this, for Lyme disease.
I'd say it's almost always worth it when you don't know.
Exactly, because they've checked for everything else, but
yeah. But I mean, so when you kind of went back to school and you got your nutrition certification, you got into kind of this new mode of helping people. That's kind of like, it's similar to, in a way, like our stories, like doing this podcast has been about trying to just whether inform people or just give people hope. That's really what this whole podcast kind of manifested from. It's also therapy for me, so that's good. But
so I was Dr. Wahls, she's a big fan of the Nutritional Therapy Association, and they have a big annual conference every year. Maybe not this year. Last year was, we actually met in March, right before COVID shut everything down in Portland with Dr. Wahls. But I went to their first conference, and Dr. Wahls was a speaker. That was really why I definitely traveled to Portland to go. And I remember walking in a room and seeing her sit at a table, and I went to walk up to her, and I got kind of close, and just like the emotion I started crying, and I ran away, and I went to the bathroom, and I cried for a little bit. I went back, and I got the nerve to say hello to her. I probably just looked like a geek, and she didn't know who I was. And the second year she came back again to the conference, and this year I decided that I was going to bring her a local bag of Portland paleo goods and things that she could eat from Oregon, because we have a lot of really good food in the area. And I brought her this nice little bag of gifts, and she was like, oh, great. And she's like, you know what, can you take my jacket and my purse and my phone? And I need to be here at this time, and I need to do this. You don't mind doing this, do you? And I was like, oh gosh, no. Like, I'll do anything you want. So I got to spend the whole weekend with her and be her little assistant, and it was awesome. I didn't think I'd necessarily ever hear from her again. And a few months later, she came out with the Wahls certification program. I had just graduated from school. I couldn't justify spending more money on another program because I hadn't made any money yet. I didn't have any, so I probably could have justified it, but I didn't have the money to pay for it. So I wasn't going to do it. And one day I got a call from one of her staff members, and they said, Terry wants to know why you haven't signed up for the certification program. She thought you'd be the first one. And I was like, how does Terry know I didn't sign? I can't believe Terry knows that. And they said, so her and her wife were talking this morning, and they figure it's money. They figure you don't have the money to do it. And they actually need somebody to help answer emails in their customer service department. So they would like to give you a job, pay you, and give you the certification as part of the job.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
that's awesome.
What? Me? Wow. That was just a dream come true. Her certification program that time actually didn't go through very well. Her lawyers decided that they didn't there was too much liability doing it online and not meeting with the people in person. And, so I actually never finished the program. Other people did. They did let that first group of people go through, but I didn't even finish it. I was busy answering emails and working. And I did that for a couple years. Didn't really have much contact with her, would work with her staff. And one year I said, you know what, can I come to the seminar in Iowa? I'd really like to come. And they're like, oh yeah, of course. And you can work. So I got to go to her live seminar in Iowa. That was an amazing experience. 3 days in the Marriott. They fed us 3 meals a day, 3 Wahls meals a day. Man. They had a whole buffet line actually that you could pay for separately of all Wahls food, Wahls desserts. They give you coffee and coconut milk at your table every day. It was just amazing. And I really got to know her, and I got to know the staff, which was great because I didn't know a lot of the people that I worked with.
That's awesome.
I went back the second year, had a great time. And that is when they offered me the health coaching job for her private practice. Dream job. I can't even think of a better job ever. And it was amazing. So she would video Zoom me in to her live appointments. She would spend 3 hours with a patient, going through their timeline, explaining what she thought they should do. And I got paid to be on video and listen to that.
I remember.
It was amazing. And darn COVID. When COVID hit, we could no longer see patients in person. And that was really heartbreaking.
What are some things that you've noticed? There's so much more than just the food aspect that's important to health. What are some other aspects of this journey that you think really people need to take into consideration to better their health?
Stress.
Yeah.
You have to let go of the stress. And we can't get rid of stress. We can't make our lives perfect. It just isn't possible. You need to spend more time relaxing. Some people meditate. Some people pray. You need to have more time just letting it go than taking it in. Yeah. And that is number one. And we've been doing a lot of health coaching lately with the Radical Health Upgrade. And almost every person, stress is a factor, and childhood trauma or past trauma. And that's a tough one that, and I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, but people really need to work on that stuff and let it go. And in my own life, I don't let the bad stuff get to me. I take it in, I say that sucks, and then I let it go because it does me no good. And it's not always that easy. Last 2 or 3 months ago, we've been trying to move for the last 2 years, and we finally sold our property. We got ready. We have 10 acres. We raise sheep. We weren't bringing the sheep with us, so we actually gave all of our sheep to friends and said, you know what, you come and you butcher them and you fill your freezer, because we can't take a freezer 2,000 miles either of frozen meat. And as soon as all the sheep were butchered, it fell through.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, what if it takes 2 more years to sell? And now we have no animals. We have nothing, the farm. And I got a fever the next day. The stress was so much, I got a fever. And that's where, you know what, I just had to let it go. And we all have different ways of dealing with it. For me, I give it to God. And just, God has a plan for me. It'll work out. Dr. Wahls says that often. We all need some type of spiritual life. People have different forms of that. But you just got to let it go. And I choose to be happy. And it is a choice of how I deal with things.
Well, hope heals,
There is hope. The body wants to heal.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have to give it what it needs and take away what it doesn't.
Exactly. Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. We will see you in the next one. I've put all this information down to Wahls and Beth, not Health.
I'll take it. She answers. Call me Health.
Yeah. But I'll put all those links down in the description so that if you want to, you can reach out or at least look into some of their stuff. I think it's truly amazing what they're doing. And we'll see y'all in the next one.